I'm Margaret Whitley, 82 years old, and the night my house burned down, I was standing on the front lawn in my nightgown holding a leather satchel with the last papers that still belonged to me. The fire crew said it was faulty wiring, but I'd had the place rewired just 3 years before. My son stood beside me with one arm around my shoulder. Too quick, too calm, too ready with a solution. By the next morning, I was sitting in a nursing home room with pale blue walls and a suitcase full of clothes I didn't recognize. My daughter Aubrey kissed my cheek and promised they'd visit every weekend. The smile on her face looked rehearsed, like it had been practiced in the mirror on the ride over. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the people closest to you were hiding something. I grew up on a little plot of land in Kansas. My father farmed barley and taught me how to split fence posts with a steady hand. He didn't say much, but when he did, it mattered. I learned early to keep my books balanced and my words measured. I met my first husband, Logan, when I was 19. He said I looked like someone who could keep a secret, and I guess I was. Before long, I found myself managing more than just the household. I handled ledgers for 3 of his side businesses, some of them official and some better. Left unnamed, Logan died young, 32. A car accident, the paper said. Though I knew better, by then we'd already bought up quiet stretches of land through a shell company called Betrayal Holdings, and by the time I remarried to Edward Whitley, a decent widower with a soft voice and a son named Gordon, no one in town knew anything about my past. Not even Edward. He died 26 years later of a heart attack. Just a few weeks after our anniversary, the children thought I lived. Modestly, but I still managed that land from behind closed doors, raising rents in all but 2 neighborhoods. Gordon's and Aubrey's leases stayed untouched. They never knew why. On the morning of my 82nd birthday, I swept the kitchen floor like always, made my coffee black as tar, and checked the porch plants, the same lilacs Logan and I had planted when we bought the place, had overgrown the trellis fence. The kids were supposed to come by 5. I'd set out extra napkins and a pie plate just in case they brought dessert. They arrived at 4:30 sharp, Gordon with a shirt stretched too tight around the middle. Winona, his wife, in a sleeveless blouse and tight smile. Aubrey came just after with her husband Zeph, her scrubs still creased from the hospital shift. The grandkids trickled in, Marlo and Thornton, each glued to their phones. I heard Marlo whisper that the house felt old and smelled like furniture polish over cake. Gordon mentioned something called Tranquil Springs, a new elder living center 10 miles north, he said. Some of his co-workers' parents loved it, Winona added. They already had a spot available just in case Aubrey reminded me that I'd fallen in the bathroom last month, that I'd nearly hit my head, that it wasn't safe to be alone. I nodded and kept cutting the cake. I didn't mention the pistol in my nightstand, or the escape route I'd memorized decades ago when sneaking out meant meeting Logan under the stars. They left by 8, said they had early mornings. The house was quiet again. I put the dishes in the sink, turned off the porch light, and headed upstairs. It was the smell that woke me later. Not the smoke alarm that never rang, just the sharp sting of burning cloth. I rolled out of bed, pulled on my robe, and grabbed the satchel from the closet, then climbed out the bedroom window, down the trellis, like I had all those years ago. By the time the fire crew showed, the flames had taken the first floor. The neighbors called Gordon. He showed up with Aubrey not long after. Both too clean-faced for the hour, too calm. The next morning, they said it was best for me to rest someplace safe. Just for now. They said Aubrey had already packed a suitcase. I sat quietly in the passenger seat and let them believe they'd won. What they didn't know was the land under their homes. The land they thought they owned was mine, and it always had been. And just like that, a plan started to take shape. The nurses at Quiet Harbor called me Margaret, but I still wrote M. Whitley on the drawer above my bed. The room was neat, quiet, painted a soft cream, with no pictures on the walls. The bedspread was pale blue, the same color as the uniforms the aides wore. Every item in that room had been chosen by someone else. Even the clothes hanging in the tiny closet still had the tags on them, new generic, not mine. My first morning there, a young woman named Linda knocked before the sun was up. She smiled like someone who had been taught exactly how wide to grin and exactly when to speak. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitley. I'm your caregiver this week. Did you sleep okay?" I told her I could manage just fine on my own. She nodded and still stood close by while I got dressed. The pantsuit they'd packed for me was the color of oatmeal and the blouse buttoned too high. I hadn't worn anything like it in my life. Still, I didn't argue. Not yet. At breakfast, Linda led me to a round table by the window where an older gentleman was cutting his toast into squares with precise movements. His hair was white at the sides, sun-weathered on top, and his eyes were sharp. "Mr. Holt," Linda said, "this is Mrs. Whitley. She's just joined us." He nodded once. "Webb Holt. Sit where you like. Food's not bad if you don't mind soft eggs." I introduced myself and sat down. He didn't ask where I came from or what brought me here. Just buttered his toast and said, "Used to farm west of here. 50 years. Still miss the dirt under my nails." "I kept books," I said, picking up my fork. 50 years of numbers and ledgers." He looked over at me. "That explains it. You watch everything." I didn't say much else during that meal, but I listened. You can learn plenty just by watching who lingers and who rushes out. After breakfast, we were given a tour. The director, Mrs. Palmer, was dressed in beige from head to toe and smiled like she was presenting a luxury hotel. There was a library, a TV room, a garden with benches arranged just so. At the far end of the building was a small indoor pool. Clean, quiet, controlled. By the time the tour was done, I knew the names of 4 staff members, 3 residents who liked to talk too much, and the exact location of the office phone marked for personal use. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get started. That evening, Aubrey called. Her face popped up on the screen, hair pulled back, tight lips pressed into a polite curve. "Hi, Mom. How are you settling in? Everyone treating you okay?" I told her the food was fine and the bed was soft. "That's great," she said, looking off screen. "G and I are handling the insurance paperwork. We'll come by soon." She ended the call with a cheerful "love you," but never once asked if I wanted to come home. After the call, I pulled out the notebook I'd kept since my first wedding anniversary. Logan had given it to me with the words, "Write everything down. Paper forgets less than people." Inside the cover was my name in his handwriting, faded now, but still sharp where he'd pressed too hard. I turned to a blank page and started a list. Item 1, house insurance. Full replacement value plus contents. Technically in my name, but I had no doubt G and Aubrey would try to file the claim themselves. Item 2, the land. Every square foot of property surrounding their houses belonged to Vastel Holdings. They'd never connected the dots, never wondered who their landlord really was. They thought the land had come cheap by luck. They were wrong. By the 3rd day, I knew the routines of the staff better than they knew each other. I learned which nurse took extra breaks, which aide left the medication cart unlocked too long, and that Nancy, the afternoon nurse, could arrange town transportation if asked politely and handed a folded bill. I didn't need much. Just a ride and an hour with my lawyer. I called Marcus Fielding first. He'd been with me since Logan passed. Never once questioned where the money came from, only whether the paperwork was clean. "I was hoping you'd call," he said. "Heard about the fire. I've been trying to reach you." "I'm at Quiet Harbor," I told him. "Gordon and Aubrey had me placed here. I need to know if they've tried to move anything. Accounts insurance permits." There was a pause. "I'll dig into it. Do you want to know about their debt status?" "Yes," I said. "All of it?" Next, I called Rita Saunders. She'd worked at City Hall when I handled the books, and now oversaw incident reports for the fire department. "Rita, it's Margaret. I need a favor. Quiet one. She hesitated. That's not really... Remember 2006, when that audit almost caught your numbers 2 weeks off? She sighed. All right, I'll look into it. You didn't hear that from me. The last call I made was the hardest. Jenkins had once worked security for Logan. He was well into his 90s now, but still picked up on the third ring. I need to know what my son and daughter have been doing for the last few months, I said. Who they're meeting with, where the money's going. They're your kids, Margaret. They also may have set fire to my house. I need facts. There was no reply, only a quiet breath. Then I'll see what I can find. The days passed. Aubrey called once more. Gordon stopped in for 15 minutes and left before the second hand hit the top of the clock. My grandchildren didn't visit at all, but the information trickled in one envelope and one phone call at a time. Rita called first. Margaret, it wasn't a short circuit. The report lists 2 separate points of origin and there's evidence of an accelerant. I'm sending you the file. Don't tell anyone you got it from me. Then came Marcus's courier envelope, 20 pages of bank statements and filings. G had been trying to secure power of attorney over my finances since early spring. Aubrey had asked the insurance agent about claim limits twice in April, and just a week before the fire, both had signed off on a permit application for commercial development on the lot where my house stood. There was also a line item, $2,000 cash withdrawal from Aubrey's joint account the day before the fire. Jenkins called 2 nights later. Zeph met with someone flagged in our old files, he said. Used to do torch work. Surveillance photos been sent to Marcus. It's him. No doubt. I put down the phone, closed the notebook, and stared out the window. They thought the house was the prize. They forgot about the land. They thought I'd fade away in here too quiet and too tired to fight back. They forgot who taught me to play dead before making a move, and now it was my turn. By the 3rd week, no one watched me anymore. I came and went as I pleased within the walls of Quiet Harbor, moving like someone who had made peace with things. The staff had their routines, and I had mine. I always wore the same sensible flats, kept a cardigan folded neatly over my arm, and never left my notebook behind. Webb Holt and I played chess in the garden most afternoons. He was deliberate with every move, tapping his knuckle on the edge of the board as he thought. I liked that about him. No wasted words, no small talk. Just careful attention to what mattered. One Tuesday, as he adjusted a rook, I asked, You said your son's in produce. Fergus? He nodded. Helps run farmers' markets. Wants his own shop. Can't find a spot that isn't overpriced. Looking near town. Right downtown, Webb said. Our family farm was 2 miles west until the developers came. He wants something local, something with meaning. I made my move without speaking. He stared at the board and gave a half laugh. You think 5 moves ahead. My brother played like that. The next morning, Nurse Nancy brought in a sealed envelope with Marcus's handwriting on the front. I waited until after breakfast to read it. I took my coffee to the far end of the library, unfolded the document slowly. Inside were bank statements, permit filings, and a printed floor plan. G and Aubrey had already consulted with an architect. The lot where my house had stood was to be the cornerstone of a community retail plaza, their words. The insurance money would cover the first phase. They planned to apply for a loan against the property value after. One page caught my eye. It was labeled Preliminary Financial Risk Assessment. My name wasn't listed anywhere, just theirs, as if I had already ceased to exist. That afternoon, I waited by the front steps. Webb sat beside me with his newspaper folded neatly on his lap. Around 2:30, Fergus arrived, wiping his hands on his jeans. Mrs. Whitley, he said, shaking my hand. Dad said you wanted to talk. I did, I said. Let's find somewhere quiet. We sat in the small conference room behind the recreation area. I laid a folded map between us on the table. This is Oak Street, I said. My house stood here. I know it. Fergus nodded. Right near the park. I'm willing to sell the lot, I said. Fair price. No bidding war. No developers. Just a straight sale to someone who'll build something that matters. He blinked. You're offering it to me, I am. Why, he asked. That land could go for 3 times more. Because I don't want 3 times more. I want a good shop with clean windows and local signs. Something that serves people. You have the background, and your father speaks well of you. Fergus looked down at the map, then up again. I'll need a loan. Then don't wait long, I said. The offer stands, but only for a little while. He shook my hand again. I'll be in touch. When they left, I called Marcus. We found a buyer, I said. Start the paperwork, and check if G or Aubrey have taken further steps with the land. They've applied for a commercial zoning adjustment, Marcus said. Filed under the assumption you're incapacitated. Block it, I said. Quietly. The following Friday, Fergus called back. His voice was tight with excitement. The bank approved the loan. I'd like to move forward. Marcus set the meeting for Monday. I arranged a ride into town through Nurse Nancy, telling her it was for a dental appointment. She didn't ask questions. Marcus's office still smelled of old carpet and furniture polish. The same oak paneling, the same dusty ficus in the corner. Fergus was already there, wearing a clean button-down and holding a pen that clicked in his hand. We sat across the table, and Marcus walked us through the sale line by line. Fergus asked questions, reread 2 paragraphs, and signed with a steady hand. When it was done, I reached for the folder and tucked the final copy into my bag. Marcus poured 2 small glasses of sherry from the cabinet behind his desk. It was a tradition between us, one Logan had started long ago. What now? He asked. They'll find out soon enough, I said. They'll be angry. They'll come storming in thinking I've made a mistake. You prepared for that? I am. The next day, Webb met me at the garden bench after breakfast. Fergus says someone came to the site yesterday, he said. A man and woman. Said they were your children. They are, I replied. They didn't look pleased. I didn't think they would. They left when he showed them the sale papers. I nodded. That's how it should be. 2 days passed without a word from anyone. Then Nurse Linda came into the rec room and said, Mrs. Whitley, your daughter's here. Aubrey stood in the hallway holding a bouquet of tulips, her coat still zipped. Mom, she said, stepping forward. I wish I'd come sooner. I pointed to the chair across from mine. Go ahead. We're working on the insurance, she said, avoiding my eyes. And we're planning something for the lot, a small shopping plaza. It's a good opportunity. I didn't speak. We didn't want to sell it, she went on. It wouldn't feel right. You like it here, don't you? I kept my voice even. When do you start? Soon, she said. Just need final permits. Zeph's meeting with the contractor next week. I nodded. Sounds like you've been busy. She smiled, unsure. We're doing it for the family. I'm sure you are. She left without asking what I thought. The next morning, Marcus called. The deed has been processed. The land now belongs to Fergus Holt. There's no legal path for them to reverse it. Good, I said. Let's get ready for step 2. Gordon arrived the next day red-faced and pacing. He didn't knock, just barged into the activity room where I was sorting a box of used books for the shelf by the window. Webb looked up from his puzzle, raised one brow, and went back to his crossword. You sold the land, Gordon said, flatly. Without telling us. I closed the box and stood up slowly. The lot was in my name. Always has been. We were in the middle of plans. You knew that. I saw the blueprints, I said. I wasn't interested in being a silent investor. His voice rose a little. You're not thinking clearly, Mom. This isn't how families handle things. I motioned to the hallway. Let's not do this here. We walked to the back porch where the folding chairs faced the garden path. Gordon stood while I sat. His jaw worked back and forth before he finally spoke again. You should have told us. Aubrey's furious. She was furious when I wouldn't sign over power of attorney. That was for your protection. I looked at him carefully. You asked me once if I trusted you. The answer is, I did. He didn't reply right away. The wind stirred the bushes along the walkway. I've spoken to a lawyer, he said. There might still be a way to contest the sale. You won't find one, I said. Everything's above board. Fergus Holt owns the land now, and he's already broken ground on the shop. You picked him over your own family. No, I said quietly. I picked someone who asked permission instead of forgiveness. He left without saying goodbye. Later that afternoon, Nurse Nancy came to find me. There's a woman at the front desk asking for you. Says her name is Carly. Claims to be your granddaughter. I followed her down the hallway and found Carly leaning against the wall. Arms crossed, looking like she hadn't slept. Grandma, she said, eyes wide. They're losing their minds. Dad's been yelling for days. Mom won't stop calling the county office. I nodded. You doing okay? She shrugged. I didn't know they were planning to tear down your house. They told us it was just going to be a little office for tax stuff. They had bigger plans, I said. I've seen the documents. She hesitated. They told me not to come see you. I figured. Carly glanced around the lobby, then leaned in closer. They're trying to move your accounts. I saw Dad with some paperwork, and Mom was on the phone asking about a health proxy. I've already spoken to Marcus, I said. He sealed everything. They won't get far. She looked relieved, then pulled something from her jacket. This was in Dad's desk. It looked important. It was a folder, gray plain, unmarked. Inside were copies of checks made out to someone named Arlen Deeks. The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it right away. One of the amounts was circled in red ink, 15,000. Where'd you find this? I asked. Behind his tax binders, she said. He'd hidden it in the back slot. Did you make copies? She handed me a USB. Scanned everything. Figured you might need it. I gave her a long look. You've got your head on straight, Carly. She smiled just barely. I learned from you. The next morning I called Jenkins. Arlen Deeks, I said. Does that name ring any bells? He paused, then said, Used to run cleanup jobs for hire. Arson mostly. Operated in 2 counties. Went underground a few years back. I told him about the checks. Send me the copies, he said. If Deeks was involved, I'll find out. That evening, Marcus called with news. I've confirmed it. G and Aubrey hired Deeks through a holding company. The same firm filed 2 permits tied to the fire date. All trails lead to them. I sat quietly, notebook open in front of me. On the page, I wrote one word in large square letters. Confirmation. Later, after lights out, I walked to the garden. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and damp stone. I sat by the hedge and flipped through my notes under the porch light. Each entry, each receipt, each line had led here. They thought they'd left no trace, but they forgot who kept the books. 2 days later, Fergus stopped by with a box under his arm. We started pouring concrete, he said, grinning. Thought you might want to see. Inside the box was a framed sketch. The storefront had wooden beams, a small awning, and wide glass windows. The sign read Margaret's. I traced the letters with one finger. That's generous. My dad says you once helped him save his land from a crooked buyer. This is just square. I nodded. Looks like it'll be a good place. He paused. I didn't tell them where I got the name, but folks are already asking. Let them wonder. He left the sketch with me. I set it on the shelf above my bed, beside Logan's old watch and the brass pin from my first accounting job. That night, I received another call from Marcus. We're ready to file the formal complaint. with the fire marshal and local police. You sure you want to go forward, I am? I said. He paused. It could get loud. They'll come after you with words threats. Maybe more. I know. You won't be alone. I looked over at the sketch again, then folded the cover of my notebook shut. They already had their turn, I said. Now it's mine. The complaint was filed quietly on a Monday morning. By Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on my door. It wasn't a staff member, it was Officer Garland from the local fire marshal's office. He stood in the hallway with a polite but firm expression, a worn leather notebook in his hand. Mrs. Whitley, he asked. I nodded and stepped aside so he could enter the small reading room where Webb and I had been sorting magazines. Webb gave me a look, but didn't say a word, rising slowly and heading out the back door. I'd like to ask you a few questions if that's all right, the officer said. He waited until I sat before opening his notes. We've been reviewing a series of documents submitted earlier this week regarding the fire that destroyed your home. Your attorney included copies of insurance statements, permit filings, and bank records connecting two individuals, Gordon Whitley and Aubrey Whitley, to a third party named Arlen Deeks. Does that sound accurate? Yes, I said calmly. I kept a copy of every transaction. Some of the original documents were scanned by my granddaughter. And you believe your children hired Mr. Deeks to intentionally start the fire? Yes. He didn't flinch, just nodded, made a note, then asked, were there any threats or arguments in the weeks leading up to the fire? There were conversations about signing over property. They wanted to develop the land. When did they first approach you? 6 weeks before the fire? I declined. Were you living alone at the time I was? My husband passed 4 years ago. He looked up. I'm sorry to hear that. I nodded once. We'll need to verify several of these claims with the insurance company, zoning board, and bank. He continued. I'd also like permission to access the private drive footage you mentioned. Your lawyer said you had security cameras. I do. The files are with him. He stood and tucked his notebook under one arm. This may take some time. I can't promise how quickly it will move. I understand. Before he left, he paused. You've been through a lot, Mrs. Whitley. If anything feels off, calls, visitors don't hesitate to reach out. That evening, I sat by the window and watched the sun fade behind the trees. Webb brought me a ginger ale without asking and sat beside me in silence. By Saturday morning, word had spread. Nurse Linda mentioned seeing Gordon in the parking lot the night before, pacing near the entrance. He didn't come inside. Sunday Carly came again, this time alone, her expression guarded. Dad says you're making things up, she said. He says you're confused, that someone's manipulating you. I handed her a folded copy of the fire marshal's inquiry letter. She read it slowly, then looked up. They're scared. They should be, I said. If the evidence holds, this could become a criminal case. She sat for a long time, then asked quietly, what do you want to happen? I want the truth to be known, not for revenge, just for clarity. That night, I called Marcus and asked him to set up a meeting with the investigator and the insurance adjuster. He said he'd take care of it. By Tuesday, Officer Garland returned, this time with a second man in a dark blazer. This is Mr. Price from Continental Insurance, he said. He's reviewing your original claim. The three of us sat at a small round table near the nurse's station. Mr. Price had already spread out photos of the damaged timelines, even old emails between the firm and Gordon's business. There were inconsistencies, Mr. Price said. We flagged them initially but didn't have proof. With these new records, including the payments to Deeks, it's different. They committed fraud, I asked. We believe so. Intentional arson to collect on the homeowner's policy. Officer Garland added. Once we verify the payments and confirm Deeks' involvement, charges may include conspiracy, insurance fraud, and arson. I nodded. Will they be arrested? Too soon to tell, Garland said. But they'll be questioned. Officially. That afternoon, Webb and I played chess again. I lost in 6 moves. You're distracted, he said. A bit. I admitted. He looked out toward the hedgerow. Fergus said the framing's going up next week. He asked if you'd stop by. I think I will. Friday came with an unexpected knock. This time, it was Aubrey. She didn't have flowers, just a slim file folder in her hand. They came to the house, she said without preamble. 2 men in suits. Said there's an investigation. I didn't respond. They showed me copies of bank transfers. Asked about permits. I never filed myself. Gordon handled all that. Did you sign anything? She hesitated. Some of it, yes. Then you're involved. Mom, she said sharply, her voice cracking. We didn't mean for this. We needed money. Dad left us with nothing. You always made things look so easy, but we were drowning. I watched her closely. You could have asked. We didn't want to beg. I stood up and walked to the desk. I retrieved the only thing I'd prepared for this moment, a letter in a plain envelope, addressed in my handwriting. I already gave this to Marcus, I said, placing it in her hand. It outlines every transfer signature and date. Your names are listed throughout. I haven't released it yet. But if anything happens, if you try to retaliate or bury this, I will. Aubrey stared down at the envelope. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said. Just stop lying. To me, to Carly, to yourselves. She left without another word. That night, I wrote in my notebook. Justice moves slowly, but it moves. By the time the first charges were filed, it had been almost 6 weeks. Gordon and Aubrey were both named in the complaint conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, attempted arson, and unlawful transfer of estate assets. The formal arrest didn't happen right away, but they were questioned under oath and required to surrender their passports. The hearing was scheduled for late spring. Marcus called me that morning. His voice was steady, but I could tell he'd been on the phone with the district attorney all night. They're not taking a plea, he said. Not yet. Gordon's attorney thinks they can claim diminished capacity. They'll try to drag this out. Let them, I said. The records won't change. Later that day, I found Webb waiting for me by the greenhouse. He didn't say much, just handed me a folded paper. It was a program from the Quiet Harbor Community Board. The back page showed a notice about land surveyors being spotted near Southwood Creek. They think they can sell it anyway? I asked. Webb shrugged. Gordon must have filed with an offshore trust before the charges hit. It'll get blocked, but it may take time. I took the paper and tucked it into my satchel. That night, I pulled out the map. Southwood Creek had been part of a conservation plan Logan and I drafted back in 1968. We'd placed it under a holding agreement with the county to protect it from development. It was the kind of document most people forgot after a decade. But not me. Marcus arranged a meeting with the county clerk. She was young, sharp, and surprised when I placed the faded agreement in front of her. This predates our current zoning system, she said. But it's valid. If this is recorded properly, no changes can be made without a public vote. I nodded, then recorded again. By Thursday, the land was frozen. Gordon's trust couldn't access it. Any attempt to build or sell would trigger a public injunction. That night, Carly came by. I saw Dad in the parking lot again, she said. He looked tired. I don't think he's been sleeping. He's made his choices, I replied. She sat beside me. Can I ask something? Of course. Why didn't you ever tell us about the land or the holding agreements? Because I was waiting to see who would take care of it. She thought about that for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. I've been working on something, she said. A proposal to convert part of Southwood into a community garden and walking trail. something people can use, something free. I read through her draft line by line. It was thoughtful, well-researched, with clear zoning boundaries and sustainability notes. Who else knows? I asked. No one. I wanted to ask you first. Then let's file it, I said, together. The following week, I met with the board of Quiet Harbor's Development Committee. I presented Carly's proposal and the conservation file. They asked questions, reviewed the maps, and said they'd vote by the end of the month. 2 days later, a man in a gray coat showed up at my door. He was from the local newspaper. Mrs. Whitley, I'm writing a piece about land ownership and elder fraud. Your name came up in the filings. I assume it did. He pulled out a recorder. Would you be willing to speak on the record? No. But you can speak to Marcus, and if he agrees, I'll answer questions through him. He nodded and thanked me for my time. That evening, the article went live online. The headline read, "Local Matriarch Fights Back After Alleged Fraud by Family." It included no names beyond mine, just a quiet paragraph about resilience and due process. But people read between the lines. By the end of that week, 2 other residents at Quiet Harbor approached me. Both had suspicions about their own children managing finances improperly. I gave them Marcus's card. Friday, I walked the north end of the property with Fergus. The frame was up the doors, delivered the gravel path leading out toward the tree line. You were right about the slope, he said. Drainage held. We'll finish the roof by April. I placed a hand on the railing. It felt sturdy, well-balanced. A home, not just a structure. Webb joined us halfway down the path. He held out a small envelope. What's this? I asked. It came from the board. They approved the trail project. Carly's idea passed. I opened the note. The final line read, Phase 1 will begin summer tests in partnership with Quiet Harbor residents and the Whitley Trust. That evening, Carly returned. They're going to try to counterfile, she said. Gordon's lawyer wants to challenge the estate holdings, say you were manipulated. They can try, I said. But the trust documents are ironclad. They're getting desperate. I handed her the board's note. So are we. But we're building something better. She looked at the paper, then back at me. I never said this before, she said. But thank you for believing in me. I reached over and gave her hand a squeeze. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting a soft orange light across the hedgerow. I thought of Logan, of the contracts we buried in safe boxes and the promises we made over hand-signed ledgers. I thought of Edward and the quiet patience he offered in the years that followed. And I thought of Carly, bright, steady, and just beginning. The storm wasn't over, but the ground beneath me had shifted, and this time it wasn't crumbling. It was holding firm. The trial began on a rainy Tuesday morning in mid-April. The courthouse was older with tall windows that let in just enough gray light to cast long shadows across the rows of wooden benches. I wore a navy skirt suit I'd kept pressed in the back of my closet, simple, clean, nothing that would draw attention. Carly sat beside me in the gallery, her hands folded tightly in her lap. We didn't speak much that morning. We just listened. Gordon arrived first, flanked by his lawyer and a young paralegal who looked no older than Carly. He glanced over at us, then quickly looked away. Aubrey came in next, dressed in a beige coat with gold buttons. She didn't look at me at all. Marcus leaned toward me and whispered, "Opening arguments should be short. They'll lead with the insurance documents." He was right. The prosecution opened with a timeline: Gordon's early transfer of property titles, the suspicious refinancing of 2 parcels without board approval, and the overvalued life insurance policies purchased just months before the fire. They presented evidence slowly, deliberately, exhibit by exhibit. When they pulled out the photographs from the house, the original plans Logan and I had drawn up in pencil, the blackened beams, the charred remnants of the family room, I felt Carly's hand reach for mine. Then came the paper trail, the offshore accounts, the matching wire transfers. the internal memo from Gordon's brokerage firm showing he'd liquidated 2 retirement portfolios the day before the fire. It was all there. Gordon's lawyer objected repeatedly, citing lack of context, hearsay, procedural missteps. But the judge, a thin woman with gray hair and a quiet voice, overruled most of them. By the end of day 2, the courtroom had thinned. A few people from Quiet Harbor had shown up to sit quietly in the back. Fergus came, once nodded in my direction, and left without a word. I appreciated that. On day 3, Marcus called his first witness. It was Webb. He wore his church jacket freshly pressed and sat tall in the witness box. Mr. Fletcher, Marcus began. Can you tell the court how long you've worked for Mrs. Whitley? Almost 17 years, Webb said. I came on after her husband passed. And in that time, have you ever seen her sign over property without full documentation? No, sir. She reads every line twice. Laughter stirred briefly in the gallery, but the judge tapped her gavel lightly. And when did you first notice things were changing? Webb hesitated. After Gordon came back from Denver, he started talking like he owned the place. Marcus nodded. Did you report that to anyone? I tried, but the paper trail was hard to follow, until I found the burned blueprints. Marcus held up the envelope Webb had brought me months ago. The plans were fragile edges darkened by soot but still readable. Do you recognize these? Yes, sir. I pulled them from the ash pile behind the barn. That was the moment everything turned. The jury watched closely, their eyes flicking between the exhibits and Gordon's expression, which had begun to stiffen. The defense didn't have much to counter. They argued it was all misunderstanding, a series of bad investments, miscommunication, family tensions taken out of context. They called Aubrey to the stand, hoping to paint her as a detached bystander. She spoke softly with careful restraint. I didn't know what Gordon was planning, she said. He told me the land was already his, that Edith had signed it over before her health declined. Marcus stood. Mrs. Whitley has no formal health diagnosis. She drives, manages finances, files her own taxes. Aubrey fidgeted. I didn't verify it, she said. I believed him. Did you benefit from the transactions? A pause. I suppose I did. Indirectly. Carly looked down at her shoes. That night we drove home in silence. The wipers beat a slow rhythm against the windshield, and I could hear the gravel crunch beneath the tires as we pulled into the driveway. I stayed in the car after Carly went inside, watching the lights flicker behind the curtains. I thought about all the times I'd driven that road back when Logan was still alive, when Gordon was young, and asked about interest rates and contract clauses with genuine curiosity. I remembered how he used to help me sort receipts at the kitchen table. The next morning, closing arguments began. Marcus was brief. This case is not about bitterness, he said. It's not about family disagreements or missed birthdays. It's about intent. Mr. Whitley falsified documents. He transferred property he did not own. He attempted to profit off the presumed death of a woman who is still very much alive. The evidence speaks for itself. The judge recessed for 2 hours. We waited in a side room, windowless and quiet. Carly paced. I poured 2 cups of coffee and waited. The verdict came just after 4 p.m. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom didn't erupt. There were no gasps or outbursts. Just a quiet stillness, like the moment after a long storm when the wind finally stops. Gordon lowered his head. Aubrey sat very still, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Sentencing was scheduled for June. Until then, they would remain under supervised release. As we left the building, the court officer nodded politely. Good luck, Mrs. Whitley. I nodded back. Carly and I drove home without saying much. But when we reached the gate, she pulled over and stopped the car. I didn't know what would happen, she said quietly. But I'm proud of you. I looked at her. No, I said, I'm proud of you. We sat there a while, just watching the porch lights flicker on in the dusk. Inside the house was warm. The kettle was already whistling. I pulled down the good cups, the porcelain ones, with the pale green ivy along the rim. We drank quietly at the table, our chairs creaking the way they always had. And in that quiet, I felt something shift, not a victory, not revenge, but something steadier. A settling, a return. The garden opened the first week of July. Carly had painted a wooden sign for it, hand-lettered soft blue with our family name in faded white. We planted late summer tomatoes, bell peppers, marigolds, and rows of sweet basil. The air smelled like damp earth and honeysuckle, and every time I stepped outside, I could hear bees working their way through the lavender. Life returned quietly, one seed at a time. The sentencing came and went. Gordon was ordered to serve 8 years with restitution. Aubrey was given a lighter sentence and community supervision. I didn't attend the final hearing. Marcus offered to read the statement on my behalf, and I trusted him to do it. Some things I had already let go. We didn't hold a celebration. There were no toasts or cake. Just one quiet evening, Carly and I sitting on the porch with lemonade, listening to the wind stir the trees. She was starting classes again in the fall local university evening schedule and had taken on some part-time work at the county archives. She liked the quiet, the old records, the feeling of piecing together stories that mattered to someone. One morning, I found her in the garden with an old photo of Logan tucked inside a clear sleeve to keep the soil off it. She'd propped it against a stone beside the basil. She didn't say anything about it. I didn't ask. The town moved on too. Slowly. People waved again when I passed. The co-op invited me back as an honorary board member, not for the votes, just to lend experience when needed. I agreed with limits. Some chapters don't need reopening, but I've found there's still meaning in helping new ones begin. Every so often, I'd get a letter. From someone I hadn't heard from in years. A neighbor, an old friend of Logan's, even a woman from Aubrey's extended family. Each one different, but all with the same undertone, some mix of surprise, apology, or a quiet kind of respect that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Carly brought home a dog one afternoon, a tired old retriever with clouded eyes and a limp. She named him Walter. He followed her everywhere. I wasn't sure at first, but he grew on me. Funny how that works. I still keep the ledger in my nightstand drawer. Not out of spite or nostalgia, but as a reminder of what it took to stay rooted, to withstand wind and fire and still stand. Sometimes in the evening, when the light falls just right on the porch steps and the air smells like cut grass and coffee, I sit there and think about everything that happened. Not with anger, not even sorrow, just stillness and a kind of understanding that only time can give you. Justice doesn't always come loud. It doesn't always come fast. But when it does, real justice, it brings something steadier than victory. It brings peace. Thanks for staying with me through all of this. If you've ever had to rebuild from something that tried to break you, I hope this story reminded you that your roots run deeper than you think. And if it did, feel free to share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'll be right here. The porch light's always on,